was another look at a feature that actually is not very new. It was released sometimes in version 11, I think 11.3, maybe 11.4, somewhere around there, and maybe even before that. Anyway, it's an 11.x release feature, and it's relative to the preview of the layers blending mode. Now, what I mean with that is, let's say you have an image like this, and it's a little bit flat. It doesn't have full contrast. So certainly the first thing you can do after you load it, or let me just reload it here to start from scratch and close the stored copy. So first thing you may want to do, just from a workflow perspective, is go to store the image, right? Make a stored copy. You see that also from the image menu, and there's an option here, store image copy. So that simply allows you to quickly restore it. Of course, if you've never seen that, if let's say you lose this image, you mess it up, and you want to quickly restore the original, you just click it right there, and that puts it back in. And there are, of course, other options. The little pull down here has a few more things where you can, in fact, combine it with the existing image, such as dividing or screen mode or multiply. Multiply will usually get you a nice, better contrast. And dynamic range, right? In case the full dynamic range is not used yet, first thing you'll want to do is go to Image, Expand Dynamic Range. Now, it may be very subtle or not noticeable, especially when it's colored. And so one thing I would do is try to work in the address space of lightness, of brightness, the value, basically in the value space. So one thing we'll do is we'll go to convert that to a grayscale. Use colored lens, for instance, and that way you can already get a little bit more dynamic range. And then you can do even more by going to expanding that dynamic range from the image menu. So now you know there are pixels that are black and there are pixels that are white. And we have the whole gamut, the whole range of gray values in between. I'm going to store that as well. So we now have a colored image, which is not highly saturated. We could saturate that a little bit more. Let's go to just the hue saturation value, or just saturation, and you can increase that. There are a couple of different options. I would perhaps also look simply at the one I'm a little bit more familiar with. It's hue saturation value, and that one can certainly do a great job too. Even increase the value if you must, but let's just leave it with that. And I'm going to store that. So now we have a highly saturated color focus image and a value focused image. And so I'm going to load the colored one into the base layer. You see that on my sidebar. The sidebar is on my right side in my configuration. And I'm going to add a layer. And what happens in Dog Waffle is that these layers are blended layers. They are combining with the other image. So you have a preview now, and that's the feature that was added sometime in version 11.3, I believe, where you have a dynamic preview for interactively checking what's the effect of that. So now, right now, we have a plain white image in the upper layer. And you see sometimes it's doing next to nothing to the underlying image. But like, for instance, the default mode is the same as the multiply. And when you multiply white to any color, it's still that original color, so no change there. Whether you, let's say if you use multiply as a blending mode and you disable the layer, you will not see a difference. All right, so but if we load the grayscale value in here, now we have an action that is a multiply against the grayscale image. And the darker the grayscale image, the more you'll see a darkening of the image from the layer below. Right? These are being multiplied together. And as a result, you may end up getting a nicer contrast. How much of that you want, you can adjust. There is the multiply value here. You can say you don't want any of it, or you want the full range of it, and so you can adjust that. But most importantly, you can also change and dynamically see the impact of using a different blending mode, right? So sometimes these blending modes are really interesting. Like in this one here, you might use that to get rid of the landscape down below. The really dark parts in the front, they're disappearing, right? Pretty much. Right? There's a little bit of dirt around here and a little bit here. But for the most part, Phoenix turns out to be an interesting mode here to get rid of the landscape. Although the sky does turn blue as well, or greenish, and you might need to adjust that, which is certainly doable. So yeah, explore this. It's a nice interactive, dynamic view. We could call it a preview, but it's really just doing the job on the fly here, not in a small preview window. And then, so let's say I want to combine it with this. This is the value mode of the layer blending. And, there's a couple of other things you could do beyond that, but perhaps first let's merge those two layers together and compare before and after, right? So here's the one we have at this point. And at this point, we could certainly also do a few other things, such as adding a bit more of the light diffusion. That's one of the filters in the photographic area, light diffusion here, so that the white fluffy clouds could perhaps blend out into the darker regions too, give it a little bit of a glow or halo effect, and you might make that the precise mode. A couple of other things you could do, since the sun is setting down there somewhere, or rising, we don't know, but it's down there somewhere. You can tell by the direction of the clouds' shadows. We could actually add a little bit of a light show coming from there. So perhaps the blur mystic mode, or there's an alternate mode too. So right now it's in the middle. We need to bring it down a little bit, and perhaps around, I don't know where the sun might be, but somewhere around there, and then increase the factor and the quality. And perhaps it's too intense, so you can subtly change the level here. This is the intensity of it. Although you can also do that with the interactive undo right there. Don't forget this, the interactive undo, also known as what is it? Fade last action. Oh, it's under the filters. Filter fade last action. That's to fade that most recent action. Right, and so that's basically very similar to changing the mode or the level that you have in the filter, in the prior filter. Anyway, thanks for watching. This was just an idea to show you some of the image manipulation, filter layering, and other options that maybe you haven't used yet. So have fun with Dog Waffle.